Now, in the midst of all this change and jazz that the teenagers were doing, there's actually a clash, and here comes the clash, right? So the younger generation felt free to go and do things that were maybe illegal, listen to jazz, dance in clubs, drink alcohol, etc. And so the parents began a backlash, and so the older generation went back to traditionalism, and we have a word that becomes synonymous with traditionalism, and that is fundamentalism. Fundamentalism do not believe in modernism because it basically said you're stepping down and what's next. And so you have, well, they were taking out Christianity. Then they said the Bible's not infallible, meaning it makes mistakes. Man is not made in God images. No miracle, no virgin birth, no deity, no atonement, no resurrection, agnosticism, and atheism. So they said it was a bad slope. And rather than going down here, they wanted to go back to the fundamentals of Christianity. So fundamentalism is that really hinges on the idea of creationism, that somebody or something created this earth. And what they really disliked was evolution. This is the same William Jennings Bryan who we talked about before, disliking evolution. So for fundamentalism, know that it's the basics of Christianity. It's traditionalism. They believe in creationism. Somebody or something created this earth. And that they also disliked evolution very much. So much so that in some southern states, in particular Tennessee, they passed laws. Tennessee passed a law known as the Butler Act, which said you could not teach evolution in school. That would be like somebody coming to me and say, hey, there's a law passed, you can't teach this certain concept in school. And so for an academic person who wants to educate, that is a difficult concept where you're at. So we meet a teacher named John Scopes. And John Scopes felt, as I just told you there, who are you telling me what I can and cannot do? He said, I don't necessarily believe a lot in evolution, but I think they need to know it. So he ignored the law. He taught evolution. Okay? And so what happened out of this? He's fired. Loses his job. So man pops in the picture and says, I will represent you, and there's another organization he represents. The man hired to get his job back, essentially, and prove that there's nothing wrong, is named Clarence Darrow. Clarence Darrow is an attorney for the ACLU. ACLU stands for American Civil Liberties Union. Freedoms. Okay? Now, on the transverse of this, I don't think I have a picture of it for you, but the other person representing the state of Tennessee is William Jennings Bryan. Yes, he's an attorney. Yes, the same one who ran for president. Yes, the same cross of gold. Same guy, okay? So he represents, William Jennings Bryan is the one who's going to try to prove that Scopes is in the wrong, whereas Darrow is going to try to prove the state wrong, saying that it's not in the state's rights to say what you can and cannot teach. Interesting concept given Common Core. But nonetheless, here we go. Now, this became such a media circus for some that one such reporter, H.L. Mencken, here he is, reporting on this, that is very inaccurate to say I hate everything. I'm strongly in favor of common sense, common honesty, common decency, and that makes me forever ineligible in public office. He is a big critic. And while seeing this clash in the courtroom, he gives it the nickname we call it. And so for this reason, when John Scopes is taken to trial, we know it as the Scopes Monkey Trial. In essence, it was basically Scopes trying to prove that evolution should and shouldn't be taught. Now the outcome of that is that he was told he can't teach it. And so there kind of goes into the idea, and we're kind of going back, remember? Return to normalcy, going back to the way things were. Now, the idea here, William Jennings Bryan, here he is, right? Realtor, telling the young boy, thou shalt not think. This is a criticism from H.L. Mencken about these things. Now, who is the guy they're trying to do this? Who are we talking about here? Charles Darwin is at heart here. Charles Darwin is past at this point. But Charles Darwin is the creator of the idea of evolution, also of survival of the fittest. We've talked about social Darwinism and all these things, but that is what we have. Now, just a couple of little things that need to be tied in here very quickly. In the 1920s, if you wanted to get a job, and now here's something that just really cool, one of these word things, right, about Darwin, and there's a lot of things you can see in there. Theory, selection, years, natural. Pretty interesting, but you can look at that. Now, if you wanted to get a job, it was left at the direction. Remember, the government will not jump into things, and so some unions went as far as to establish what are called closed shops. What this basically means is that in order for you to get and or keep a job at this particular establishment, you had to be a member of and participate by going to union meetings, paying dues, etc. to a union. Hence, closed to the outside, only open to unions. Now, an open shop means anybody's free to come. Closed means it's closed only to union members, all right? Now, the last thing I really want to talk about here, and this kind of goes to show you how we're moving away and why women became a little bit more independent. When President Harding was in office, he signed what is called the Shepard-Towner Act, Shepard-Towner Health Care Plan. This is the first time that there will be federal funding given for maternity leave and child care, and that's a big deal. You're like, well, whatever, my mom's always worked outside the home. Well, without this, it wouldn't have been there. Now, the objectives you have for this little thing here: explain how traditionalism clashed with modernism. Give several examples. Flappers. Let's go with monkey trial. There's more. 2. Compare the flappers of the 1920s with women today. I'd wager to say, if somebody was horrified by the dancing of Elvis Presley in the 1950s and we put on Nicki Minaj, Anaconda, they might have a stroke. But that's a discussion for another day. Number 3, describe how a noble experiment, prohibition, led to bigger problems. They banned alcohol, but that didn't stop Al Capone, organized crime, etc. 4, describe the cult of domesticity. What is the idea there? What are we trying to say for women? And lastly, compare the healthcare plan we talked about here, Shepard and Towner, versus universal health care under Obamacare. The next little thing we're going to look at is the last thing in the 1920s, and that would be the Harlem Renaissance.